Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric, this thing, the show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Undoing, a great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we're literally picking up where last week's episode left off with Grace calling the cops. Obviously, Jonathan trying to tell, Henry, wasn't me, I didn't do it. Obviously, the cops come and show up, and you have, Henry looking out the window, and I was so curious, how he was going to feel about it, because it's your mom called the cops on your dad, but there's got to be a part of you that, because he's still unsure about the whole situation. I thought that was a great aspect of this episode too, is how much both of them kind of flip-flop, because neither one is really sure, because obviously first and foremost she's super pissed because she found out about all of this stuff about her husband. You had an affair with this woman at this time. It's you were potentially the baby daddy to her child, and now potentially you're the person who murdered her. So all that in itself, it just, it's the man you married, you find out that basically your entire life is crumbling around you. It's already happened because of him and the choices he's made, the actions he's made, and now your marriage, it's just everything, your entire world's being flipped upside down. So, then also the cops throwing it in your face and be oh yeah, so how long was it before he came here? Oh, he just showed up and everything. It's we're just trying to figure out, he covered your mouth. Did he have his hand around your neck? It's no, she had to explain it. And she's you're talking to me like I'm guilty of something. They're no, we're just trying to check severity of the assault. It's because from the very beginning, they've had a feeling maybe she's been involved with her. That is so interesting because it kind of goes back to what I brought up last episode, because her friend brings it up. It's you need to get yourself a lawyer, because now it's going to turn to a whole situation of how much did you know and when did you know what, and whether or not you had a hand in this murder and everything. So it's they're already looking at her potential, I guess it's just something about her reads a little off to them. I don't know whether it's just maybe she has this very air about her that I don't know what it is about her that they're so adamant. I mean, I guess we get the evidence at the end of the episode, but we'll get to that soon enough. But I guess that evidence is what drives their the need to go after her. So because it never made sense, because it seemed like it was all going towards her husband. Like I said, from the beginning, they were always super suspicious of her. So that's why I don't get it. Why they were kind of discounting anytime she'd be I don't know where my husband is. Oh, you really have no idea where your husband is? Didn't I just say I have no idea where my husband is? So, but obviously it's the flipping back and forth, because it's just obviously it's all over the news and everything. Her friends at the courtroom trying to give her updates. I thought it was interesting because I forgot the character's name, but the actor who plays, what's his name, the Badger, because she's oh yeah, they give him that name because he to chew on stuff, but was it a badger or was it a beaver? I can't remember what she had said. I felt like she said badger, but maybe she had said beaver. Home dude, I've seen that actor pop up in a few things. The show on Amazon, Catastrophe. He's been in a couple episodes of that. He was, I think the most recent thing I saw him in, and it's only because I saw it fairly recently, was Penny Dreadful. He's in a couple episodes of Penny Dreadful, which is interesting because he was on the law enforcement side of things and he's in the law enforcement side of things of this as well. So I just thought that was just kind of interesting. Nevertheless, kind of circling back to what I brought up before, it is that complicated thing of, like I said, both Henry and Grace have complicated feelings about this, because it's a thing of, did he do it? Do you think he did it? But it's also the situation of it's already bad enough that Grace has to deal with this. Like I said, her entire life got turned upside down, and you have to deal with your complicated feelings, but you also have to deal with the fact is your son's life got turned upside down because he's young enough that obviously he understands what's going on, but still it's he's in a complex place. You're an adult. You're not really the most well-equipped for this situation, know where your kid is. But I mean, there's also the complicated thing too, is she's a therapist too, so I'm sure that kind of messes with her mind a little bit, because there's her therapist's mind about this approach. I'm sure she tries to view this thing from the perspective of a therapist, trying to see whether or not with her skills, because she even uses it later on saying oh, I've been a therapist for 20 plus years or whatever, that I think that is probably making her wondering, I think it comes from the perspective of, as a therapist, with being able to see through so much, be able to see the truth behind people. How did I not see the truth about my husband? Where my emotions, it's obviously it's a personal relationship, so you have your blinders on to that. Or maybe he hid it so well, who really knows? Once again, that's why it comes back to the whole thing of how much did you know and when did you find things out. But nevertheless, there's layers upon layers to this whole situation. For one, she goes and visits Jonathan, And obviously for him being like, you have to trust me. He's like, I get it. I don't deserve your trust, but it's like, you know me, you know in your heart that I couldn't have done this. And she's like, I don't know. It's like, you've lied upon lie upon lie. You've lied about not, it's like your job situation, you being with this woman. He's still trying to make it seem like Elena was like crazy and obsessed with him. And, and also saying like, it's like he needs people who know him to be, credible witnesses to suggest like there's no way he's such a great upstanding dude. There's no way he'd actually do this. Later on, Grace went to visit that dude from the hospital who worked with Jonathan, and it's like, all right, like as I figured, he signed some documents so he's legally not allowed to say anything or he could lose his job. Well, it turns out it's like, home dude is not afraid to throw, because obviously he's like, nah, Jonathan's a piece of shit. Basically saying like he reveled in it. It's like, for him, it's like, it wasn't even just like, it's a whole, he basically says like a narcissistic God complex, because it's like, which basically he was saying like, it's not even like, oh, like the admiration he get from people. It's more like he was almost like a vampire in the sense that he fed off the emotions. It's like, it's almost like he didn't care about helping the kids and them being like, oh, you saved me and stuff like that. It's not the gratefulness. It's almost like just the emotion behind all of it is what he sucked up and enjoyed. Because obviously she's like, Elena could have been deranged or whatever, but it's like, no, your husband was already like this and it just kind of came back to bite him. Like he just could never get enough. Like almost saying that like he sought after Elena, because it's like he was warned over and over again, because it's not like they were even being subtle about the relationship. He wanted it, and the narcissist that he is, he saw something he wanted, and he went after it, So trying to make it seem like he's not the person. He wants to make it seem like, oh, she pursued him and he was like, he just gave into his whims. It's like, no, it seems like he like pushed for a lot of this. He got off on a lot of that, just like, oh, here's this woman who's so grateful because I saved her son. It's like you have this power over them because they feel indebted to you, but at the same time, it's also the thing of like, oh, you worship me, but also like you have these feelings for me because the feelings you have are like, oh, feeling so grateful that I saved your son or something. It's a very complex and manipulative situation. It's a very complicated power dynamic, because it's like, oh, this is someone who's in a position who, in a medical position, who saved your child. So you're always going to be grateful, but they could always sway those emotions of you being grateful to them into what they needed to be. So that could easily be what Jonathan did. And it's not even what that dude, what's his name, Stewart, like it suggested, But obviously when it comes down to it, I can't remember. I'm probably mixing up the series of events on like what happened first, but the whole thing is like, well, for one, she ends up finding out from her dad, like, oh yeah, like, yeah, he asked me for some money one time. He said that, you were having some, money issues that so he said that you're too proud to actually admit it. He was like, honestly, Dad, I balled. Like, he was like, that you would never ask me for money if you were struggling. It's like, well, how much did you give him, Dad? It's like, I gave him $500,000. I'm like, okay. I'm assuming that $500,000 was meant to cover the fact is that he wasn't in work for those 3 months. We never found out when he got the money, but I'm assuming that's what that was supposed to be. Not unless that was him splurging on Elena, but I feel like we would have seen examples of that. We didn't see any like, oh, you buying her stuff. It seemed like it was just a straight up affair. I mean, granted, he lost his job on it, so it's not like he had the money to really splurge. But I'm assuming it was meant to keep up their lifestyle, because it's like if he has that money coming in, like, well, that $500,000 sitting there, he's making it seem like he's got income coming in. Hence why like she was unaware that he hadn't been working for like the past 3 months. So now there's another thing on top of this of like, oh, lies upon lies, because just when you think you've got everything, he told you even more. And I'm sure even more is going to come out, because there's some stuff that he's never going to tell you, because he knows it's going to make him look even more guilty, because it's going to look like I have even more secrets and more stuff that I hid. Because I also didn't tell you, it makes me look even more like a liar. He'll probably spin it to be like, yeah, I'm so regretful. Like, there's just so many lies I've told. It's hard to keep them all straight. So I'm sure that's maybe something he'll go for. But also, like, there's a whole situation with Grace bringing her son to see him. And obviously, at first, he's like, no, I'm going to be okay. But then, like, him and his mom are looking at someone else. It's like this lady with someone that she loves is in prison, and she's giving him a hug, and it's like, oh, sorry, like, no touching. And it's just the realization of like, holy crap, like, like not being able to touch the person you love. Obviously, you have Grace looking at the woman being devastated when they're being taken, that person's being taken away. And it's just that realization. And when the time came, obviously, like, Jonathan tried to make some jokes, but it's like, no, his son's not in a jokey mood. It's like, so were you fucking her? And it's like, whoa, getting straight to the point. Oh, at first it's like, did you kill her? No. Were you fucking her? It's like, wow, getting straight to the point. And he was like, yes. And it's like, so you don't love me or mom? He's like, no, I definitely love you and your mom. He's trying to spin it to be like there were extenuating circumstances to it. Like, there's more to it than like as simple as like, I don't love you and your mom. Of course I do. That would never change. Well, when this is all said and done, we could be a family. But he's like, this will never be this. Like, this is something her dad was trying to tell her too. Like, this will never work out the way you hope that it will. But Jonathan's like, I hope that, things can, they'll never, it's like, they can never be a family. Like, even if you find out, because that's the thing, like, no one knows what the future holds, because either he goes to prison for murder, and so their lives are forever changed. And even if he gets all free, there's always going to be that thing of like, did he do it? He didn't go to jail, but did he? He did it, didn't he? And then there's also the thing of there's the whole affair situation, which even then, I don't know if Henry realizes that the baby is, that's his half-sister. He really didn't have too much commentary about the baby the moment she was like, you have a daughter. Not unless I missed it, he didn't say too much about that subject. It's just kind of, the moment she brought it up, he kind of looked a little sad and sorry. But even then, he never really brought up too much about, when this is all said and done, what are you going to do about that situation? That is your baby. Like, what are you going to do about that? Which is even more complicated because Elena's husband is stalking Grace, which is so interesting because, prior to all this, that's what Elena was doing. She was latching on so much to Grace. Once again, we still don't 100% know why she took it. Was it just because she was having an affair with her husband and she wanted to know, who's this woman he's married to? Who's this person I'm the other woman in comparison to, had to find out whether she was an asshole or something. But it's like, oh, you're kind, so maybe it made her feel bad about having the affair with her husband. I don't know. Maybe we'll kind of get some answers to that soon enough. But now it is the situation that, this kind of ties into the money conversation because it was a whole situation of, like I said, I can't remember if that was before or after. I want to say that was around the same time, but Grace saying that she's going to get a lawyer, not just for herself, but for him, someone to defend him. And it's like, why are you going to do that? You think, oh, you're going to take him back, that your marriage is going to be fine after? She's like, no, I'm not naive enough to think that. But it's like, there's a chance my husband, he might be innocent. And basically her defense is kind of like, don't I owe it to my son? But it's like, are you doing this 100% for your son? I mean, I think it's partially for Henry, but I think it's also for yourself because you have to hold on to hope that he's not guilty, because you have to believe that, there's some part of him that isn't the monster people are painting him to be, because, it's like, because it makes you think, how could I not see it? It's like, if I have to hold on to some belief that he's a good person, because if I don't, that means I've been married to a monster, and I having an insight into the human psychology, could see him for who he really was. So, I think that battle and turmoil is why she's even more adamant about trying to prove his innocence, or at least believe it, or at least trying. What she seems more so than anything is the thing of, I need to know the truth, one way or another, whether it's, because obviously his lawyer had talked to him, because he was like, I'm innocent. He's like, oh, okay, yeah. And he was like, does it really even matter that I'm innocent? He's like, honestly, no. He's like, because honestly, it'd be easier on me if you were guilty, because it'd make me feel a little less guilty myself about, defending you. Because now it's a whole thing of, if you are actually innocent, which, there's a chance that there might be, a smaller chance that you are, but it makes it a little harder to defend. At least you can just be like, all right, you're guilty of sin, but I'm going to do my best to defend you. It makes it a little harder, especially because all the evidence is literally stacked against him to be like, you are super damn guilty. So, and there's also the whole conversation, you're a doctor and doctors can be dicks, and it's like, you're not in a position to be a dick anymore. And even bringing it up to Grace being like, I think your husband's a dick. I don't think he's a killer, though. So, I think that, once again, probably helped flip-flop so much in her mind about whether or not he was guilty or not. Regardless, circling back to it, obviously, Grace running into Elena's husband. Well, for one, they're trying to avoid being around him. It's like when she went to pick up Henry, she's trying to leave as soon as possible. But then later on, she starts noticing him following her. And even he's kind of catching himself like, oh, what am I doing? But then later on, he shows up at her place and everything. And so she was trying to say, like, it's probably not appropriate that we're talking. And it's like, your husband murdered my wife. So it's like, when is the time to talk? And so it's this whole conversation about, like, you know, he's like, your husband did this. It's like, he had an affair with my wife. Now, Grace, once again, it's those moments where, like, it seems like at moments she's defensive, but then other moments she goes on the attack because she's like, you trying to, like, scare me, Mr. Alvarez? Like, I'm at the point where I'm not going to take anyone's bullshit anymore. Even throwing it out there, like, oh, but what about your wife? Like, could there have been other men? And he was like, no, there was no other men, you know? So, because obviously it's the thing of... Because obviously he's trying to make it seem like it's like, oh, it's effed up that what kind of person has an affair, you know, with, you know, their patient's mother, like, you know, who's, you know, going through so much, you know, trying to look after their child and everything. What kind of doctor, what kind of person does that? She immediately turned that around like, what kind of woman has an affair with a doctor that's looking after your sick child? Kind of twisting it like that. Because obviously that's going to be where this goes, because later on she gets that lawyer, Haley, who's like, I'm going to be straight up with you, like, regardless of what you want from this, it's not going to be the solution you want it to be. I'm not a fixer. I don't fix things. I'm not going to be the end-all, be-all that fixes, you know, I can't undo anything. I can't make this all go away. Nice use of the word undoing, just because, like, obviously that being the title of the show and everything. But it's like, I can't make it all go away. I can't fix all this. All I can do is give your husband the best defense. I can like, what I do best, I can muck it up. I can muck up the defense's, the prosecutor's evidence, so that basically, you know, do whatever she can legally to make it so that they don't have enough evidence to reach the statute of, like, enough evidence to make it clear that he's guilty or whatever. Like, if she's going to muck up things, it's kind of like the whole point. It's like, you know, and obviously with mucking up, and that kind of flows into that conversation. That's going to involve digging up some dirt on Elena, painting her in a certain light, trying to paint him in a certain light. Because obviously there's certain evidence probably trying to, like, you know, the cops might have cut some corners here and there, so get certain evidence thrown out so they can't reach, like, the bare minimum of what they need to, you know, push forward with this whole situation. So... But now there's also stuff, like, obviously, as we saw in the episode, that seems like it's hinting to the fact is that Elena's husband knew about Elena and Jonathan's affair. So now it puts him in a bad light of, like, oh, he knew. But granted, that doesn't mean that didn't have to be because with what the cops say later on, them saying, like, he wasn't on any surveillance footage, could have easily gotten around it, but still, it would have probably been a little hard to do that. But it's like, so him finding out, he probably knew about the affair, because obviously the cops, you know, the Mendoza, like, the main detective is questioning her dad about questioning Grace's dad, because it's like, your daughter is hiding something. I don't know whether it's some evidence or whether it's just the fact of the matter she's actually involved in this. But it's like, help me out, you know, with this whole thing. But obviously, like, her dad was basically like, deuces, middle finger, get out my face, unless you have, like, a warrant or something. So... Not less, like, obviously, like, the whole point was because obviously they feel like she's hiding something, so it's like, obviously he's hiding something, but it's like, is he hiding the fact is that he knew about the affair? Because if he admits he knew about the affair, it's going to make him seem even guiltier. So did he ever confront Elena about the fact that he knew about the affair, you know? That's the big question. But obviously, you know, Grace goes to the cops about her confrontation with him, with Elena's husband, and now it turns into the whole thing for her. It's like, for one, she's pissed because she's like, you don't want to give me any answers, but it's like, you guys come at me, like, super hard, trying to, like, confront me and use all these tactics against me, and that's what upsets her and pisses her off, that you want to try to push me into a corner so that you can get whatever you need. And it's like, for her, she says, I just need to know, you know, there's got to be other cameras there, so you need to tell me whether there's a possibility that the husband could have, like, does he have an alibi and whatnot. But it's like, turns out he wasn't on the surveillance footage. But the moment they're like, all right, we got something to show you, I'm like, it's her. And lo and behold, it is her. But she's like, wait, what? At first because I was thinking like, oh, do you not remember doing that or something? But she's like, no, I didn't even know she lived in that area. But it's like, oh, now brings up the question, what was your relationship like with Miss Elena? Elena? And that is, because there was a clip in like the first episode, I want to say, after the murder, like, that there was this moment that we didn't see in the episode where Elena was like naked and close to Grace, that I'm like, was there something there? Now my brain was immediately like, so does that mean subconsciously Grace knew about the affair but like kind of blacked it out, like when she potentially killed Elena? Or could it be a situation of, hey, I did randomly stumble across where she lived, this is just pure unhappy coincidence? Or, was there something, was Elena having an affair with both the husband and the wife? I don't know. They definitely are pointing to the fact there is definitely something off about Grace, and the detective is kind of getting it. He's just like, there's something your wife's not telling us. And it's like, maybe it's because subconsciously she doesn't really know. Because obviously with what we get from the title opening, like, sequences, the little girl with the red hair, it seems like that's supposed to be her. Then I'm like, there has to be some significance, I guess, in her childhood that, like, relates to all of this, maybe, potentially. It's what I kept inferring, but I don't know if that's something they'll really go into. You think so? Which would be interesting, considering her being a therapist and there being like some subconscious stuff that might be related to this case. I don't know. A lot of moving pieces to this whole situation. I'm really curious to see where all this takes us now, especially with that surveillance footage of Grace being nearby. Because it's like, oh, the only people we've seen that are related to this case near Elena's place around the time of the murder is your husband and you. So, what that new evidence brings to light, what that all means going forward, how is, Grace going to respond to this when it comes to the whole, Jonathan situation, what new secrets are going to be unveiled. We'll ultimately have to wait and see where everything takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.